we can see a horizon together, all right, when our Eros is evolutionary Eros, when we're not just in our local lives, but we're actually able to feel the warp and the woof of the whole, the fabric of the whole, then we're allured to each other. And so when we step in this moment of the Anthropocene, when the human being actually has this huge capacity to influence the vector of evolution itself, when we take responsibility for the whole in the Anthropocene, then we become alluring to God. We become partners with the divine. I want to just kind of capture a little bit of the joy of this moment. We have, a shorter time than usual this week because we have to end exactly on time because we're doing this fantastic dialogue series with my friend who's actually been reading the Dharma, has been reading the new story of value we're telling in CosmoErotic Humanism. He actually sent me a note that he spent the last few weeks reading deeply two of the key volumes, Andrew Sweeney. So we're going to end precisely on time and invite everyone into that conversation. But right now, we have an enormously important week. I'm wildly excited about this week. I've missed you, everybody, the last 2 weeks, greatly. And I've been engaged in other teachings that were necessary to move the Dharma and move the new story of value forward. And I have something I'm ecstatically, urgently excited to talk to you about this week. So I've been looking forward to have this conversation, and it's been ruminating, through my mind all week. But before we get there, I just want to just celebrate something. It was really so beautiful to have last week and the week before Christina Tahale and Krista Josepha, and last week Terry, and each of them in their own way articulating, the new story of value, articulating a vision of CosmoErotic humanism. And this notion that we're talking about, this telling of the new story of value, this living inside the new story of value as the primary response to the meta crisis at this moment in time. That is the essence of what One Mountain, Many Paths is. We are a revolution. We're a revolution in feeling. We're a revolution in thought, in models of thinking. We're a revolution in policy, right? How we actually create policy and politics and economics. We're a revolution in religion, how we actually move from either the old ethnocentric religions of pre-modernity or the fundamental rejection of religion in modernity to a new vision of a world framework as a context for our diversity, to a vision of a shared grammar of value as a context for our diversity. And I've been talking about this notion of a grammar of value for 10 years, and I'm pleased to see different people picking it up in the space in different places. I heard someone send me an article, my dear friend and colleague, and we studied together in Holy of Holies, Jasper, sent me an article by someone in Europe, Hansi, who was talking about a grammar of value, right? These notions are becoming seeded, right? We've been talking about them for 10 years and they're critical, and I'm happy to see them beginning to appear and to sprout around. And really for the last 20 years, we've been deeply involved in the telling of this new story of value. And many of the key pieces of the story have actually become key frameworks in communities around the world, even before we published them. But they haven't yet been organized together. They haven't been deepened together in a full story of value that can actually enter not just small select communities, but the very source code of consciousness and culture itself. Now, if you just heard that sentence and you're just sitting back, then I didn't say it well, so I apologize, right? We are in a meta crisis. We are poised between utopia, and by utopia, I don't mean a blasé, convivial utopia which destroys structures of maturity and responsibility. Utopia has, for lots of good reasons, a bad reputation, utopia envisions. I'm talking about a mature, a deep, a responsible vision of new possibility. That kind of utopia. We're poised between utopia right? A vision of the most stunning world that we already know is possible in dystopia, right? And various versions of either the death of a humanity or the death of our humanity. And paradoxically, the kinds of things we've been talking about here for almost a decade are now in the last 3 years, through Corona, and then through the AI conversation, the artificial intelligence conversation, are actually creeping into the mainstream discourse, right? When, the chair of OpenAI, right, signs, a two-sentence letter saying, oh, there's actually genuine existential risk here. And by the way, they didn't use our terminology, but basically two kinds of risk, right? An actual extinction, which could result from particular ways that artificial intelligence winds up exponentializing and deploying, or the death of our humanity. And people begin to hear, it begins to enter the discourse, and people turn away. And people turn away because it's very hard to put your attention on it. Right? To put our attention on it requires something. It requires actually the possibility of seeing a way through. And right now, people don't see a way through. And the reason that they don't see a way through is because they're looking only at infrastructure. How do you change the infrastructure of things? Or social structure? How do you bind AI with law? And those are necessary, right? It's necessary to design AI in a particular way. It's necessary to bind AI, for example, with law. It's necessary to deal with climate issues. It's necessary to deal with rogue exponential weapons. It's necessary to deal with the extraction model that's extracting the basic energy resources. Everything we do, right? Blockchain, right? Burns up energy at unimaginable. AI burns up energy. We're actually working through and depleting our fundamental energy resource, so much so that there almost has to be, in the economic structure of things, right, in the energetic, physical stack structure of reality, there has to be a crash. Just a question of when. And so, wow, it's hard to look at all that and know what to do with it unless you actually can find your way through. And the only way to find our way through, right, is we need to animate all of our efforts in infrastructure and all of our efforts in social structure with a new superstructure, which means a new story of value rooted in first principles and first values, which is the context for our diversity. Telling that new story of value, not declaring it, but actually working hard on it day after day is what we're about here. And actually writing in a great library, right, like Da Vinci and Facinio, right, did out of the Florentine Platonic, Neoplatonic Academy in the Renaissance. The Renaissance was a time between worlds. It was a time between stories, between the pre-modern and the modern, where reality was breaking down without the exponential risks we have today, without existential risk. But it was a much smaller risk. But it was a time between worlds. It was a time between stories. And Da Vinci and his cohorts understood it's only a new story of value that changes, that shifts, that up-levels, that transforms, that moves the vector of reality. So now we're at this new time between worlds, this new time between stories. And again, only a new story of value that integrates the validated insights of pre-modern, modern, and postmodern into a new story can actually shift the vector of reality from an imminent dystopia, and the argument is only on what imminent means, right, to an unimaginably beautiful world. And that's what we're here to do. And every week we do an evolutionary love code, right? And every week we try and do a new dimension of this new story of value. And we're doing it for the sake of the whole. We're wholemates with reality, right? We're in love with reality. We're partnering with reality. We're wholemates with each other. We're not just role mates. We have particular roles, like parents have roles. We're not just soulmates, although we are soulmates. We love each other deeply. We're looking deeply in each other's eyes. But we're also wholemates. We're looking at a shared horizon. And we're acting in that shared horizon. We're enacting a new world. And we're speaking the words that will speak that new reality into being. That's the basic notion of Genesis. There's this voice, the voice speaks the word, and the word generates reality. So we're speaking a word, We're telling this new story of value in order to generate a new reality. Okay, so let's go slow. Let's go slow. Let's find this. We ready, everybody? We ready? So our focus, and this is week 3 of this focus. We did a couple of weeks just touching on it before, but we formally started. This is week 3. The last 2 weeks, we had a special week with Christina Tehel and Krista Josefa, and last week with Terry, which were wonderful. Now we're back on our basic, we're going to be in this for the next few weeks. We're telling the story of story, different dimensions of the story of story. What does story mean? What does it mean that reality is not really a fact, reality is a story? How does that, what are the implications of that for my own personal story? Why do I experience my life as a story? What is the nature of story? And in every dimension of life. And so the topic is, if you will, and I'm going to be talking about this later this week also with Andrew Cohen, God loves stories. That's our topic. Or said differently, the ontology of story. Ontology means story as a structure of reality, or the narrative arc of reality. That's our topic. Okay. And we're going to enter that through a new prism today. So I'm going to turn to David. He's going to resonate the code. We're going to take the code in a very particular direction, right, this week. And I'm beyond ecstatic to be with you. Okay. This is it. This is the work. This is the work. This is the joy. This is the revolution, right? We raise our hands, our fists, and we say revolution, but our thumb's on the inside, because when we hit someone, with my thumb on the inside, it just shatters. It shatters me, right? So we don't want to hit. We don't want the thumb on the outside. We want the thumb on the inside, but with a fist raised for revolution. We've got to change the status quo, and we can change the status quo, right? The greatest idolatry in the world is the belief that yesterday determines today. That's simply not true. There's always change. Evolution is a structure of reality. The question is, where's it going to go? What's the direction of the change? And it's in telling the new story of value that we directly impact the evolution of the source code. So we're here to play a larger game. So I have one question for you just to set our intention finally. Are you ready? Am I ready? Are we ready? Are we ready to play a larger game? Are we ready to play a larger game? Are we ready to participate in the evolution of love? So if you got a yes, if you got a fuck yes, right? Apologize for the expletive deleted. Sorry about that. Apologize. Right? But if you've got a huge yes, like, oh my God. And that apology was because I promised Oriana no expletive deleted in one mountain. So if you got a huge yes, right? Scream out that yes, like a fecund and fabulous, right? And unimaginable, right? Blowout. Let's love this open. Yes, all the way. So David, give us this code. We're going to take this code in a specific direction. Every single minute, like crazy, counts today. We're at 1:23. We've got exactly, what do we have, David? We've got exactly 35 minutes left. David, oh my God, do I love David, right? Take us inside. Here we go.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mark. So good to have you back. I know you were working while you were also recovering from your sickness. So, just keep it going, man. So this is a great code. I love this code because it brings uniqueness, the first principle and story, and into our intimate encounters. And it just breathes so much meaning into every interaction here. So here's this week's evolutionary love code. Every true intimate encounter is a unique self-encounter between soul stories. In a true unique self-encounter, we realize that we each are holding a piece of each other's story. The ethical demand of a unique self-encounter is that we return to each other the missing chapters of our stories. The motive force of evolution is unique self-encounters in which we are constantly returning to each other the depth of our unique stories. The ultimate expression of reality is billions of unique self-encounters which generate a unique self-symphony of stories, all of which are rooted in a shared story of value as the ultimate context for our wild and sacred diversity. It's with that I turn my word back to you, Dr. Mark.
Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you, David. Right. What a stunning code, right? Is that a stunning code? It's a stunning code. And we've spent about 2 weeks talking about that code. And I want to add a dimension to that code. Okay. And I'm also going to share with you, this is probably way too much information, share with you what I'm doing. I felt the last few weeks just somewhat exhausted, just to kind of, kind of like 15 years of kind of intense 18-hour-a-day work exhaustion. So I'm working with that exhaustion, trying to make sure I sleep, the right amount of hours a night. And also my friend Daniel Schmatzenberger has a little company called Neurohacker. So he sent me these things called Quality of Mind energy drink. So I thought I'm going to try one of those. We'll see if it works. Okay. Now, if I turn into like Dr. Frankenstein, I completely apologize. Sorry to do this on camera, but I tried to do it while David was reading. I didn't get to it. So here we go. Cheers. Cheers, everyone. This is a little advertisement for Daniel's Qualia Mind Energy shot. We'll see if it works. No, that's not true. Okay. It is great to be here. Oh my God. And Lena, I'm thinking about you every week as we're doing story. Lena and I are working together to bring together this material about story into like a critically important book on this notion of the ontology of story, that story is a real structure of reality. And I don't want to get ahead of myself here. So let me see if I can just do one piece now, but I'm insanely excited about it. I think I probably said that 4 or 5 times. So this notion I want to share with you, literally, and I don't exactly know how to explain it, but if any of you are engineers who create, new code, or artists who paint, or if you've raised children, which is the ultimate act of being an artist, or you're in a relationship, which is, the ultimate canvas of life, and we're all in one way or another in a relationship, that sometimes she whispers in our ear, and we have this stroke of insight in which we see and we understand something that we didn't quite see or understand before. So I had this whisper, this divine whisper in my ear as I was feeling into this Dharma on story that's going to get deeper and deeper, which I want to share with you. So here's the sentence. There's only one thing in the world that we are held accountable for. There's only one thing in the world, if you will, that we are judged for. And judgment is beautiful. Judgment is not fire and brimstone rained down by a vengeful Santa Claus God who has dark eyes because he's on a bad trip. Not that kind of judgment. Judgment means that there's a contemplation, there's a witnessing of everything that we do. We're witnessed by reality. That's a beautiful experience, to be witnessed by reality. And we're held accountable, not in the sense of got you, but in the sense of you count. Your actions matter, right? We don't live in an unbearable lightness of being. We live in an unbearable joy and gravitas of being, right? Being is not light. It has gravity or heaviness or gravitas, but heavy not in the sense of like heavy and depressed, more like, whoa, that's a heavy book. That's serious. So that's a right. There's a heaviness, but not in a bringing down sense, but in a gravitas sense. So there's a gravitas to reality, the unbearable gravitas of reality. So the only thing we're held accountable for, and I've now tried to explain the word accountable, the only thing that we're judged for, as it were, the only thing that really matters, actually, is, are we alluring to God? The only thing we're ever held accountable for is, are we alluring, ALLURING, are we alluring to God? And I want to just feel this with you. Just feel the sentence. We'll have to talk about each piece of the sentence, but that's the sentence that I heard early in the morning, late at night. Are we alluring to God? Am I alluring to God? Now, of course, I don't need to tell you, if you've ever been with us before, that the God you don't believe in doesn't exist. The God you don't believe in, I don't believe in. Right? God is the field of reality, the field of personhood. Not just a field, but a field that has infinite personhood and infinite power and infinite creativity and infinite intimacy. And we've said that in this new story of value that we're telling in response to the meta crisis, and the new story of value that we're telling, Elena, just because, right? And that sentence was for you, right? This new story of value, right, is one in which God is named the infinite intimate. Right? God is the infinite intimate. God's the infinity of intimacy, the infinity of power, the infinity of creativity. And that God both lives in us. I've been studying quite intently the last 2 weeks, deep in the late night, Abhinavagupta, the great sage of Kashmir Shaivism, who talks about there being a first person, right? She that lives in me, as me, and through me, all the way down to the atomic level of reality. There's some notion of first person. And of course, Stuart Kauffman, the mathematician, and Richard Feynman, the physicist, go in the same direction. That's one notion of God. There's a second person, right, which is critical, right? The beloved. I'm madly in love. We're madly in love with each other. This madly in love with the infinite personhood of cosmos. So the way they talk about it in Kashmir Shaivism is Krishna loves Radha, Radha loves Krishna. Right? The god and the goddess are madly in love with each other. They are each other's pillar. They stand together in every way. And that sense of radical intimacy, that's the second person of God. And the third person is God as the field. You can actually feel the field. Chakel tapuchin kadishin. It's called in the Zohar, the field of holy apples. But of course, George Lucas, picking up from the great interior sciences, called it the force when he made Star Wars, but that's the field. So the question is, are you alluring to God? Am I alluring to myself, to the divine in me? Am I alluring to the field? But it's even more, I want to focus on the second person, not the first person, the third person. I want to focus on the second person just to feel it. And they're inseparable. The first, second, and third person of reality are included with each other. They're interdigitated. They're interpenetrated with each other. You can't split them. So let's just think about them all together with a little focus on God as the infinite intimate. God is the beloved, the lover of the Song of Solomon's, of the Yab Yam incarnations in India, right? Of the earth and sky reaching for each other. Am I alluring to God? Now, did you get what that means? And just stay with me, my friends. It means not am I successful, not am I smart, not am I by some public tinsel, artificial, superficial, slightly repulsive standard, am I good looking? Not am I heavy or thin by any strange definition of what that means. And not am I creative, not am I talented, right? And not am I artistic or not artistic, right? None of those. Those are not the question. You know, I shared this last night, this sentence with my dear friend, Sally Kempton. It was a poignant moment, and she just smiled and she was so happy. And she said, that's so good, right? That's the one question the only question we ever have to address. The only question you ever have to ask, am I alluring to God? Now, what does that mean? So we've talked a little bit about God, so we don't get confused with a wrong vision of God. So we've talked about that. What do we mean by alluring? Are you alluring to God? It means that God wants to taste you. Do you get that? Goddess, she wants to smell you, right? So do I taste good? If God bites into me, right? Am I delicious to God? Am I fragrant to God? Right? It's deep. It's deep. And to be fragrant to God, you get it, is not based on a particular action. And it's not that I fulfill my mission. And here I want to bring this back to this notion of story. So there are two fundamental words, which are part of a larger set of 4 or 5 words that appear in the original book of the interior sciences of Hebrew wisdom called Sefer HaYetzirah, the book of creation. And the 2 words I want to address now are mispar, number, and sipur, story. And I talk about these, many, many years ago, back when I was young, right? I talked about these in a book called Soul Prints that I wrote somewhere in 1999. And part 3 and part 4 are about mispar and sipur. So mispar, your number, that's your mission. Number is a point, right? Number is very functional, very specific. There's, of course, a shadow of a person's number because you reduce a person to their number. And of course, Nazism, in its worst form, actually tattooed numbers on people. And the contemporary neo-totalitarian forms that are emerging, which are not in any way comparable to Nazism, I want to make that clear, but actually also ascribe to a person a certain quantified measure. Number is a measure. Number is a way of measuring, right? In modernity's greatness, the emergence of modern sciences comes from the move in modernity from classification to measurement. But also the tragedy of modernity comes from the explosion of the exterior technologies of measurement and a kind of stalling of the interior technologies, which address the immeasurable, right? So there's a dimension of the human being, which is their mission, their function, the particular thing they do, even in the divine scheme. This is your mission. And it's beautiful. This is my vocation. It's what I'm called to. That's my mispar. That's my number, right? But then there's something else, which is inter-included with it, but also it's a distinct form, and it comes from the same root word as mispar, M-I-S-P-A-R in English. Maybe someone can catch it in the chat box. M-I-S-P-A-R in English, right? And it's got a 3-letter root, which is samech. And stay with me in the chat box, somebody. Okay, samech, right? S-A-M-E-C-H, samech. Pei, P-E-I. And then reish, R-E-I-S-H. Samech, right? Pei reish. Right? Samech pei reish. Thank you. You're awesome. Right? Samech pei reish. It's a 3-letter root. And another expression of that 3-letter root is sipur, story. And story is different. Story has a wave quality, right? So just like in physics, there's a wave quality, and then there's a pointed quality, right? A particle quality, we call it. There's a wave dimension and a particle dimension. So the particle dimension, right, in the discretion of infinity in a point, that's the particle, that's the function. And the function's critical. It's the mission. It's my mission statement. But then there's this other dimension, which is, it's about the extraordinary in ordinariness. Charles Reznikoff, the poet, how did he say it in the 60s? Not for a seat at the dais, but for a seat at the common table. And for my European friends, dais means kind of at the podium, not for a seat at the dais, but for a seat at the common table. That's my story. My story is the fabric, the wave quality, not the particle quality, the fabric and wave quality of my life. So the question is my story alluring to God? That's the only question. Does God want to taste my story? Right? Does my story smell good? Is the fragrance of my story good? But you see, the fragrance of my story is not based on one particular action. It's not a to-do list, although there are to-do lists, right? But it's about everything, right? How I smell is so critical. And often people will come together. It's happened many times to me where a student will come to me and say, wow, I've been going out with him or with her, and we were just intimate physically the first time, and I've got to break up. They don't smell right to me. right? It's so primal. So what I smell like, what I taste like, comes from everything that I've ever ingested, that I've ever eaten. It comes from anything that I've ever seen. It comes from every feeling I've ever had. It comes from how I worked with every feeling that I ever had. It comes from all of the world of the invisibilities, the invisible world. We're so focused on the visible world. We're focused on status, right? And we're so focused on where we are in the pecking order, which is one of our evolutionary inheritances, as my dear friend Howard Bloom talks about a lot. But Howard tries to transpose the pecking order into the human world and says the entire human world is also based on a pecking order. No, not exactly. And I love Howard madly. Not exactly. There's actually an evolution of consciousness. Yes, there's a pecking order of social status. And of course, I've read David Buss, B-U-S-S, right? The anthropologist who talks about pecking order and its importance and in relations between men and women, men and men, women and women. That's all true, but there's something deeper. And that's what a unique self encounter is about. Are we alluring to each other? And are we alluring to each other? Can you hear that? That's actually the core of unique self encounter is, are we alluring to each other? And when it's we, it's not just me, it's me and my story. I want my story to be alluring to you. With all of its agony and with all of its ecstasy, with all of its tragedy, and with all of its triumph. And in the same way, I want my story to be alluring to my beloved. I want my beloved to witness my story and also to be allured, to participate, to be part of my story, to throw in your fate with me. And let's turn our fates together into destiny. And let's be unfuckable. And let's stand together. Stand by me. Remember that song? Stand by me. I'm going to stand by you, not for a particular or an exact rational reason, but because we're allured to each other. That's why we stay together. We don't stay together because functionally I don't want to break up the family and my kids will have some psychological problems. No, you should be together if you're allured to each other. Every person has a right to be allured to their beloved, right? It's not just mispar, it's not just number. It's sipur, it's story. So in that same sense that we want to be and need to be allured to each other, right? That's rooted in a deeper, that's an anthro-ontological. Anthro-ontological means the mysteries are within. Anthro, human being, ontological, the real, right? The real lives in the human being. So the same way I have an experience of, if I want you to be allured to me and we want to be allured to each other, we want to be uniquely allured to each other. So that participates in a deeper field, which is, is my story alluring to God? Does God want to taste me? Does God want to eat me? Does God want to bite me? Does God want to smell me? Right? Does God want to caress me? Right? Right? It's so deep. And I become alluring to God based on every dimension of my reality. And particularly, and this is where we started this about 6 minutes ago, particularly the invisible world. Right? And what we said about 6 minutes ago is we're so attracted to the visible world that we actually don't realize that at the moment in which we pass into the next world, at the moment of death, which is a night between 2 days, at the moment we pass into the next world, we are held in judgment. But that judgment is not fire and brimstone, right? But the pre-modern intuition of judgment was right. It got distorted through ethnocentric prisms. It got corrupted. It got degraded. But the prism was right. It was your life counts. Decisions matter. Choices matter. That's beautiful. That's ultimate human dignity. But here's what I'm held accountable for. I'm held accountable for one thing. Was I alluring to God? Like, I want to just feel that together. Okay. And if you would ask me, what is the essence of a unique self? We've started the Unique Self Institute, right, which is so important. Claire Molinare. And we're writing a phenomenology of Eros, right, with Dr. Christina Kincaid, right? And we're, my wife and partner, right? And we're whole mating with each other, right? And Christina Amlon, right, with Krista and Benjamin are into evolutionary sense making, and Lady JL, right, and Tom is working on, he's about to send me back pretty soon, our Unique Self retreat book, right? And we're, and I could go down the whole list, but we're partnering with each other in order to love each other madly, in order to download into the source code a new story of value, because that's what reality needs now. And that's what's alluring to God. Okay. Right. And what's alluring to God, again, I'm going to say it a third time, but I really want to get it. It's invisible. Right? It's what you do at 4 a.m. in the morning. It's what you think. It's what you feel. Right. And it's not that I need to program my thinking. Right. It's not that okay, those thoughts are out, those thoughts aren't alluring, get those thoughts out. No, it's not about that. It's not like the old religious world. Oh, I had a sexual thought. What am I going to do? And it's not about that. Right? My teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, said, right, that anyone who tells you that they can control their thoughts, right, is a charlatan. Thoughts come and go. What do I do with those thoughts? What do I do with those feelings? It's so deep. So there's an idea. I'm going to go deeper for a second. Right? How are we doing, everyone? Are we tracking this together? Are we together in this? Are we together in this? So your unique self is the unique way in which you're alluring to God. That's what a unique self means. And we have a notion, which is a very, very strong notion. And Zach said to me, actually, he was talking, I think it was last night or the night before, to my dear friend Daniel, right? And they're working on a particular document, right? An important document, right? Which is some of the shared work that we're doing here, and that's happening at the Consilience Project, a document on the meta crisis. And Zach was very sweet. He said, we thought of the rabbi as we were working on it. And by the rabbi, they meant me. That's what they call me, right? And we said, wow, obligation's a critical idea. And one of the things that I've tried to download in the last 15 years into reality is a new vision of obligation, and that's its own critical essay. But obligation means there's something I'm obligated to do. And an obligation in the original Hebrew is the same root word as the word love, or eros. So eros and obligation are one. What's my obligation? Right? My obligation is that the eros of my story be alluring to God. Right? And just think about that in terms of, a beloved, a friend, a deep friendship you have. Right? So you have an obligation in a deep friendship, in a deep homemate relationship, to be alluring to your beloved. And you should have many beloveds. You should fall in love with many people. I don't mean romantically, but you should fall madly in love with many people, uniquely, and create the sense of being alluring to each other. And alluring to each other means I'm allured to your story. I want to participate in your story as wholemates, not 1,000 soulmates, but as wholemates, meaning we have the shared vision, right? And we have a shared vision of the whole, and we're working together, right, to evolve the whole. We're working together to participate in the evolution of love, and we're participating together in the unimaginable beauty of sensual communion that lives between those who are participating together in the evolution of love. And so we're alluring to each other, right? I want you to feel that, right? When you're deep in caring for the whole, when you're deep in telling the new story of value, you honor everyone you meet, number one, for sure. You honor everyone. And we hold everyone, and we hold our historical relationships, with great love and honor. But we're allured to people who are looking at that vision with us, right? When we can see a horizon together, all right? When our eros is evolutionary eros, when we're not just in our local lives, but we're actually able to feel the warp and the woof of the whole, the fabric of the whole, then we're allured to each other. And so when we step in this moment of the Anthropocene, when the human being actually has this huge capacity to influence the vector of evolution itself, when we take responsibility for the whole in the Anthropocene, then we become alluring to God. We become partners with the divine. We're trying to actually shift our perspective from what we call in the interior sciences, my side, my perspective, to God's side. Mitzi Denu, from our perspective, to Mitzi Do, God's perspective. When I shift from my perspective to God's perspective, which is the basic movement of transformation, of awakening, right, of actually becoming the new human and the new humanity, becoming Homo Amor, I'm saying to God, I'm willing to look at it. I want to look at it from your perspective. When I'm a leader, I don't look at things from my particular moment of brokenness or woundedness. I honor that. I work with it, but I'm seeing the whole thing. I'm holding all the pieces. Now, of course, I can't hold all the pieces that the divine holds, but I can actually look at the whole thing. When I look at the whole thing, I become a wholemate to God. We're looking together at the whole. We're taking responsibility. We're partners, right? In fixing and healing and transforming the whole. Can you feel that? Who can feel that? Can anyone feel that? That's what it means to be alluring to God. It's not just about my number. Do you get that? It's not just about my number, my mission. It's about the whole fabric of my story. Who am I? In all of the invisible moments, what am I feeling? Right? What do I dream at night? What do I do with whatever I dream? Right? Right? It's about the deepest fabric of my interior. Am I alluring to God? And it liberates me from all other responsibility and obligation. Right? There's no other responsibility the human being has. None. Throw all the rest of them out. Only one question: am I alluring to God? Now, of course, if you're alluring to God, you're probably not going to abandon your child, right? So that's probably not a good idea. And if you're working, within the context of a system, you're going to want to be radically responsible, because that's alluring to God. So of course that's true. Of course you want to fulfill, right, all of the particular missions. But deeper than mispar, right? Deeper than, right, than number is sipur, is story. So I want to just add one thing here, and it's so beautiful. So in Luria, who's the 16th century master, and I'm just going to say for a second now, and maybe we'll get to talk about this more with Andrew a little later in about 10, 20 minutes. But my lineage master, this is just one moment in a little station break, and I'll try and add one more idea here, and then we're going to go into prayer. My lineage master, my direct lineage master, is Solomon. And Solomon is the king in Jerusalem several thousand years ago. His father's David. And Solomon is kind of the core source of the lineage that I live in. Now, of course, I'm in complete devotion to Solomon, and we've also emerged as Solomon would want and as he intended himself to include, right, many other traditions and many other ways of practice in the interior sciences and the great religions, and many other practice modes within the formal sciences, the exterior sciences, both within the hard sciences and with the sciences like anthropology and social theory and structuralism, right, and evolutionary thought and complexity theory and chaos theory. We're integrating all of that in this new story of value called CosmoErotic humanism, which emerges as ultimately sourced in a synergistic wholing, right, bringing together, weaving together of all of these strands. But at the core, at the source is Solomon, and Solomon transmits the lineage all the way through the prophets and through the judges, and ultimately all the way to a master named Akiva. And Akiva transmits it, and that's the 1st century, to a master named Shimon Bar Yochai. And Shimon Bar Yochai produces the Zohar, which appears in the 13th century. And then Shimon Bar Yochai goes to Luria in the 16th century. Luria in the 16th century goes to Leiner, right? In the 19th century, right, I wrote a couple of volumes, kind of Da Vinci Code kind of volumes, trying to liberate Leiner's thought, who is the direct lineage heir to Solomon, and Leiner is my teacher. So that's a little bit of the lineage. And so in this lineage, it's 154. It's just 2 minutes, and we'll pick up on this again next week. But there's a basic idea, which is every action I do causes arousal in the divine. So I am an arouser of God, and I'm going to talk more about that next week. But every action I have, every feeling I have, not just every action, but every feeling I have, participates in the field of divine Eros. And I actually cause arousal in the field of the divine. And I'm cause for Eros Gamos. I'm cause to bring together the masculine and feminine divine, the feminine divine. But the masculine and feminine divine they're not up there, they're not out there, they're everywhere. In other words, as Luria writes, every moment, every dynamic and reality at every level of reality, matter, life, and all the depths of the self-reflective human mind, every dynamic, every interaction, every interfeeling, every interbeing, every interbecoming, all of it is the coming together of Shrinte, right, the goddess, Kudshabrihu, God, right, the line and circle, the yin and the yang. Now, what that means is, right, I'm causing arousal in the divine. I'm causing intimate union in the divine through causing intimate union in myself. And intimate union in myself means that my inner and outer self are not alienated from each other. There's no exile between the inner and outer. I'm at one with my words, right? That's authenticity. It's what Lionel Trilling, right, the cultural critic, called authenticity. I'm authentic, or he sometimes called it sincerity. Right? That's what it feels like. And so when I'm in that place, when I'm smelling good, when my fragrance is good, based on how I encountered that feeling or that thought or that challenge or that pain, and I become a sweet smelling incense to God. I become a sweet aroma. I become myself an offering on the altar of reality. I'm making love on that altar. I'm bringing the divine together, but not because I'm God's pimp. I'm not like, right, I'm not God's sex coach. No, I'm part of the field of the divine. I'm not in a kind of technical, mechanical way causing union. I'm in the field of arousal because I am alluring to the divine. Okay, so I'm going to hold here for a second. We're going to talk more about this next week, but here's the story. The story is one question only. And on two levels. One, what's a unique self-encounter? The code that David Aitan read. Unique self-encounter is a new way of saying it is, am I alluring to you? Which means, is my story alluring to you? I'm inseparable from my story. Am I in the story of my life? Am I alluring to you? Are you alluring to me? Are we going to participate together in a shared field of allurement where we're looking at a shared horizon together, and we're alluring together? When we become wholemates, we're looking at a shared horizon. But not only, when we're also soulmates, we smell right to each other. Rollmates, we have shared function. So rollmate means my mispar, my number, right? Soulmate, right, is our hearts are one. We're one love and we're one heart, right? And wholemate is, right, and soulmate and wholemate particularly is the story of my life. My sacred autobiography is my story alluring to God. And the reason my friend Sally Kempton got so excited about this, and I shared it with KK right afterwards, is because it cuts through everything. It liberates you from everything. Only one question: am I alluring to God? Is my story alluring to God? All right. So I want to just check in for a second in the chat box, and this will be our prayer, my friends. Okay, this will be our prayer this week. Who got that? Who got that? Who could feel that? And it's a new way of saying it, but it's good. Who could feel that? Anybody. And if you got it, just tell me. So let's just be alluring to each other. Okay. Who can feel that, right? And am I alluring to God? The only question, right? Am I alluring to God, right? And you get why that's liberating? Don't ask any other question. And inside, we kind of know, and so we can feel it. Is this alluring to God? And that's you don't need to look to any book of ethics, right? To any code of law. Just ask yourself a question in any moment. Is how I'm being in this moment alluring to God? You never have to ask another question in your life. That's it. Wow. Oh my God. So we're alluring to each other. I'm madly allured to each person, right? On this one mountain place, right? To all of us. We're allured to each other. That's what it means to be a unique self symphony. We're allured to each other's instruments. Yeah. So with permission, friends, I love you madly, right? It's so good to love each other madly, right? Right? Madly, not cutely, not sweetly, not politely. Right? I love you madly, outrageously. We love each other madly, outrageously. We're allured to each other. That's how our revolution holds. Okay. I'm going to tell you one last thing. I know it's 1:59, so we're just going to put in the chat box, and we're going to go to the next. We're going to go to the dialogue with Andrew. I just want to share with you one thing. Just want you to get you from a business perspective. My friend Elon Musk, right? We've never met. So Elon said something, which I thought was wise. He said that his one criteria for buying a business, right, is do the people in the business spend significant amounts of time with each other during off hours, and it's when they're not working. He said, I'll buy that kind of business. I won't buy anything else. I mean, are we alluring to each other? That's it. Are we alluring to each other? Right? If we're alluring to each other, we can actually make this revolution happen. Right? Because we're gonna love it open unimaginably in this time between worlds, in this time between stories. Thank you. I'm so madly devoted and grateful to all of us.